April has been a wild month, and I'm going to get into exactly what has happened over the past 3 weeks at this point that has, in my opinion, changed the direction of things and what we should expect coming over the next 3 to 4 months at least. So let's jump right into it. Before we get to the charts, I'm going to walk you through that timeline. So one of the things that we've been talking about at length for the past year or so has been inflation, different reports that are out there, how that impacts mortgage rates, and so much more. We just had a very unfriendly inflation report come out, the CPI report, just last week. Now, that is multiple months in a row of what we'll just call unfriendly reports, where inflation came in over expectations. So, the short version is it's becoming clear that the Federal Reserve does not have a case to start reducing their prime rate. And again, while that prime rate is not directly connected to mortgage rates, they tend to move in a similar direction. So just the fact that it's unlikely that we're going to see a rate cut, in my opinion, in July now, is starting to work its way through all of the different financial systems and the betting markets, investment markets, and has rolled its way through to mortgage rates. We've seen mortgage rates jump up about 0.5% over the last 3 weeks, and that's not nothing, especially in the face of all the headlines so far this year saying mortgage rates will be coming down. The Fed will cut rates. We already missed the first opportunity in March. My opinion, we're not going to see it in July. And quite frankly, I've been clear about this to anybody who I've talked to over the last week or so. I don't expect any rate cuts this year at this point. Best case scenario, maybe we get one in December. So what I think is likely to happen, I will save for the end of this video. But timeline wise, again, we've seen those rates jump up. We had already seen demand starting to slow a little bit, cracks in the facade of the stable market that we've had. So with what has happened over the past 3 weeks now laid out for you, let's jump into the charts. Mortgage rates again are up about 0.5%, and that is in direct response to the unlikely scenario that now the Fed will reduce rates in July. That's becoming more clear. There's more pessimism out there to the point where it was a basically 0% chance that the Fed would raise rates in 2024. The betting markets are now starting to price that in. Still very low chance, but the pessimism is starting to build. We'll cover the election here in a minute and how I think that's going to impact things, but there's a lot of variables now coming into play here. So inventory's up from the first of the month, about 8%. That is a pretty significant jump. Normally, we would see inventory stay flat or decrease in April. That's still possible. We still have a couple weeks left, but it's not looking pretty. This is starting to buck one of now, I think, our third trend that I've been keeping an eye on. So I'm ready to say, hey, and I've urged buyers of this outside of the few that secured absolutely great properties over the last few months, urge some caution. And if you're one of them, and I've told you, hey, look, if it's the perfect property, my advice is always going to be to jump on it. The mortgage rate is a temporary piece of that puzzle. The property you can't duplicate with most of them. But if you don't see that perfect property, pump the brakes, right? You may have to not be here for the summer. That's not worth rushing into a decision that may end up hurting you and your financial situation for years to come. If you're comfortable with that, I think there's going to be some deals to be had in the fall, which is almost always the case, especially when we get toward November, December, especially with this being an election year. There's always extra chaos, people overreacting to real news, temporary, not so real news. It'll be an interesting rest of 2024, and I've been saying that for 4 years running. All I've known is chaos in this real estate market, so it's normal to me, but we'll navigate it together. Days on market are showing stable. I think we're going to start to see those inch up through the summer because a lot of the homes that are still out there on the market, the days on market are pretty high, and eventually we'll see some of those reduced prices. We'll see some of those go under contract, and that will start to tick that marker up. Now, condo prices are, coming down to only being 8% year over year increased. While single families, we are sitting there looking at a 10% decrease at the beginning of last month. We are now up to a 3% decrease year over year. It's what I talked about. Again, because of the way that the stats are done, the way that I do them, we knew that this was coming, right? We were prepared. This doesn't scare me. The fact that it's down only 3% year over year isn't really a huge change. Given the low volume of homes that we have selling here, especially in the single family market, that's within the margin of error, in my opinion. Nothing to worry about there. New listings. So we are potentially going to see our third month in a row at 88 new listings. That would be a freak anomaly that will never happen again. But what I want you to take from this is if we're looking back starting in January of 2023, that was a relative plateau, right? Of 3 months in a row of similar new listings. We've seen the same thing again here, but with the fourth month in a row as well. So even though 2023, there was a decrease in new listings in April, we're seeing that plateau maintained. So you could think of that one of two ways. Either we're now seeing more listings, or in my opinion, I think we have seen less again for a second year in a row, and it's just how they're spread out. So not everybody looks at the data, not everybody plans around, historic, when have the most listings happened, when should we hit the market. But this to me, I think we're going to end up under 88 when all is said and done. But no way, shape, or form is it going to be a drastic drop off. I don't expect it to be an increase unless we have a crazy next couple of weeks. But new listings on the whole, we are 10% under where we were at the same time last year. So if we had 100 listings last year, we only had 90, but it's a larger number than that. That's a significant miss, 10% consistently, almost 4 months in. That, again, remains to be seen what happens over the rest of the year, but that's why I track it to this degree. Usually seasonality is somewhat predictable. And the trend, right, of a similar amount of listings hitting in the first 3 months, 4 months of the year has happened again. It's just, the number is a little bit less than it was last year, but we're roughly meeting expectations. Pending sales are way down. So unless, again, we see a very strong second half of the month, which has happened in the past, we're looking at about a 30% decrease from last April. That is significant. Now, I don't believe that this is just a 1 month trend, right? We are in the face of rising interest rates. Prices have continued to rise as well. I think we've hit the point where most buyers, or many, many buyers, even more than have already tapped out, have had enough. It's not quite worth it. And there's another fact I want to throw in here that I believe is going to mess with us over the coming months. So shout out to my friend Gray Hahn at Berger Realty. Stat wise, and I've validated this with OCNJ too. So we have a rental agency, and then we have the do-it-yourself website that I love. And Dwayne's phenomenal over there. So both platforms have seen a reduction in the amount of rental leases signed compared to the same point last year. So rentals are down. There are owners who have not been able to book peak weeks, prime weeks, at the rates that they were able to book them at last year. So again, that has been a key driver in the back of my mind, is as long as these properties continue to rent at increased rates or at the same rates historically here, according to people who've been in the business for decades, have never gone down. If owners are wanting full occupancy, we've clearly hit the point where at least some of them, because the supply has continued to rise again, some of them will have to reduce the rates. And what factor that plays, how that trickles through, remains to be seen. But I think we've gotten to the end of the froth here. I think, in complete clear terms, I think we're pretty much at the top. Unless rates come down, mortgage rates, that is, that may still play with the pricing side of things. Those may still increase. But from a rental standpoint, the rental market, I think, is speaking loud and clear that they're tapped out. They're not willing to pay or overpay, as many renters feel they have been, anymore, right? Other vacations, there's other economies that are trying to stimulate activity there, and there's simply more affordable vacations available than coming to spend a week at Ocean City. So this is something to monitor for sure, how all of this ties together. But I'll give you my prediction at the end, and keep going for now. Closed sales, we're on pace to see a pretty solid month compared to the last few Aprils. It is down again. So again, these trends are adding up here. And April, in my opinion, is going to be the canary in our coal mine here in Ocean City. Months of inventory is spiking for single family homes 3 months in a row. We have prices again that jumped up because of how that 12-month rolling average is put together. We had a very low month fall off. Now we are likely to see a very low month in the condo space, which I'll get to in a minute. But again, I've been very clear that I believe this is going to continue to fluctuate between about 1.5 and 1.6 million, give or take, for the foreseeable future. I think we've hit a pretty solid balance in the single family world. Days on market may come down. We'll see at the end of the month. I would not be shocked if that jumps back up towards 55, if not a little bit above, to keep us relatively stable there. Now, months of inventory for condos, it's the first month in about a year where we are pushing 5 months of inventory. 6 months is stable market, not a buyer's market, not a seller's market. So by definition, this is still a seller's market. I think that's very clear by the pricing that has and continues to go on. But now we have 2 months of rising months of inventory, which is abnormal, right? If you look back at March and April of 2023, they were decreasing. If you go back and look in 2022, they increased a little bit. So this is abnormal. And we're seeing some trends breaking here in April. And I think the dam is breaking a little bit as well. So median price is coming down a little bit, and I do expect to see that stay about where it is, which in the scheme of things, it's a blip. But it is something that I'm going to continue to keep an eye on. There are a lot more homes going under contract under $1 million than over $1 million from a condo standpoint. That hasn't been the case the last few months. So if I want to read the tea leaves here, people are really only moving on homes that are affordable to them, that are more affordable to them, not stretching. When rates were 2.5%, 3%, it was easy to justify stretching that monthly payment a little bit, but they're very high as it is. So cash buyers, in my opinion, are the ones who are going to continue in the higher price points. But we're running out of time to get in before Memorial Day. So I do expect the lower priced homes and condos to win out going forward. Very, very stable days on market again. So here's the fun part, right? What do I think is going to happen? So mortgage rates, I think we're likely to stay between 7 and 7.5% for the rest of the year. Initially, if you go back to my forecast videos and the first few market updates of this year, I was really hoping that we were going to trend closer to 6% by the end of the year, with the bulk of that movement happening at the end of the year. Right? Very, very clear. The first 6 months of this year were not going to be pretty. They were not going to change in buyers' favor. And so far, that's played out. Now, that second half of the year, again, I no longer think that we're going to see rate cuts. And if we do, it's going to be at the very end of the year, which doesn't really help us. December is the slowest month of the year by far. So mortgage rate wise, don't expect any breaks coming up. It's possible, right? These things are fickle. They move quickly. They tend to go up fast and down slow. So keep an eye. And, this is where rate shopping really matters. If you're going to find that home that really is the one you have to have, you need to be ready to move quickly and know the lenders who you are going to want to work with will give you the best rate. So I can always help you with that if you're at that point. Inventory wise, again, rising inventory in April is not normal. Going back over the past 5 years, we have only really seen that one time, and it wasn't anything substantial. So to me, looking at trends and history, this is an abnormal situation. So we've seen 10% fewer new listings than expected, which you would think means inventory should be going down, right, compared to last year. But here we are, above where we were at this point last year, because 17% fewer homes have gone under contract so far this year compared to the same period of time last year. So demand is a little bit slower than the supply is increasing, and that obviously results in inventory going up instead of down or staying flat. So this rate situation, again, I think is going to keep us in a very tight gridlock over the next 3 to 4 months, right? Normally, when we get to May, most buyers start tapping out because they really preferred to be in by Memorial Day to have their say of how the summer's going to go, whether that's rental or personal use. So I do expect demand to stay low. I expect homes going under contract to stay low going forward. And I think it's going to be a tight 3 to 4 months. I think it's going to be tough for sellers who are really wanting to sell. We're seeing a lot more listings at this point already saying that the seller wants to close in the fall, which I think is a smart thing for sellers to do, because there's a pretty good chance you get to that point in the fall at closing date and you're feeling very good about the price you secured. Whereas buyers, I wouldn't necessarily advise that, again, unless it's the perfect home for you. You're better off waiting now at this point until towards the second half of the summer, if not the early fall, to reduce your carrying costs, to do, a lot of different things. We can have that conversation too. But price wise, again, we leveled out on single families. I don't think we're going to fluctuate a whole lot, a little up, a little down here and there. Nothing that's going to scare me. With that said, though, I am seeing something, at least in the Marion Park neighborhood, my old neighborhood, that prices are coming down, right? And nothing has really gone under contract. There's one home that has somewhat recently. The rest are either sitting stable where they are and not moving on price, but also not selling. And there's one particular property out there that's dropping to a point where I'd be pretty surprised if it doesn't go soon. Nice home, 3 beds, 2 baths, and under 800,000. I think it's a good one. But if that one continues to fall because those sellers may have more motivation than the other ones that are out there, that may set the tone. And these prices tend to be set at the margins, right? What I mean by that is the bulk of buyers, number one, are looking at not overpaying, not paying what sellers are asking in this market. It only takes a few buyers to buy at those prices to start that rise continuing. And the same happens at the other side, right? If sellers are only willing to sell in that lower half of their price spectrum, that's going to start to bring values down a little bit, at least from an appraisal standpoint. It has to. So price wise, inventory is going to keep increasing, and I think that is going to really put pressure on prices here if rates don't come down. And that's the scenario that I'm thinking is going to play out. We're going to see inventory continue to climb towards that 300. And if we don't see mortgage rates come down in any capacity, and more importantly, if there's no confidence that they're going to come down, that's going to keep people frozen. And now, what I really want to hit on here is the election piece. That's when I first came into this business a little over 4 years ago, right? 6 months in, it's election season, and people in my office were, no disrespect to anybody's party or political persuasion, but oh man, we're screwed, right? If a Democrat gets into office, stock market's going to tank, real estate market's going to tank. People are selling on that advice of, hey, I'm looking to cash out because the capital gains is going to be jacked up, and now I'm going to have to pay more if that really gets passed. There's some truth to that. That if Democratic bodies of government are in power as they are now, if you were to look at the budget proposal for 2025, they're trying to potentially take away 1031 benefits, 1031 exchange benefits, where you're saving a ton in capital gains tax. Things along that line do get proposed. That's not because of the president, though, and that's the key here. So a lot of people have this in their heads that it depends on which party wins the presidency. I've found no evidence of that. I've found no data supporting that in either way. But again, sometimes the truth doesn't matter as much as the perception of the truth. So I know for a fact that, again, 4 years ago, plenty of people sold because they thought their home values were going to get wrecked. Well, guess what? They missed out big time, right? And they're not able to get back on the island now. So I just want to urge you some caution not to put too much weight into specifically the election. There are other factors, like I mentioned, mortgage rates being one of them, that could come into play here. But I think there's going to be enough fear about this election, given that it's a repeat of 4 years ago. I think people are going to freeze up until they see how it plays out for the most part. So again, this gridlock thing, I think, is going to be very real for the bulk of the rest of the year. And I'll get in a minute here to tell you again, action items if you're looking to buy or looking to sell based on all of this information I'm feeding you right now. And days on market, of course, again, as I pointed out in those graphs, they're showing stable. I think they're going to start to tick back up here in a little bit as we see some of those homes that have been sitting start to sell. So again, if there are questions, feel free to contact me here, but let's talk about what this all means for you. If you are looking to buy in Ocean City, again, I said it at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. If there's a particular home that checks all your boxes that is unique, feel free to jump on it, right? As long as financially you have the ability to do that, that you're not banking on the rate coming down over the next year, 2 years, whatever it may be. If this is a 5+ year decision, my advice, not knowing your situation, is at least heavily consider making that move, because you don't know what's coming or when a similar home is going to come again. And that's something that buyers are up against all the time. I want to put in an offer on this home, but what if a better one comes tomorrow? Well, what if it comes in 2 years? What if it takes 10 years for another home that's going to fit your needs at a price that you're comfortable with? What if it takes that long, right? Only you can make that decision, but just know that it's something that every buyer comes up against. It's the what if, and you don't want to have buyer's remorse. So again, if you're working with me, which is highly recommended, happy to talk you through that entire process and ask you the questions. It's going to get your mind moving. It's going to get you comfortable with either route, either waiting or jumping on it. So if you're buying, that's number one. If you are not finding what you want, again, wait. I would encourage you to wait. Each fall, and I've been very clear about this, I call it deal season, starting really in October, going through mid-January roughly, you're going to be able to find some deals. It may not be on the properties that you want, right? There's no guarantee that you're going to find that perfect 4-bed, 2-bath on Central between 18th and 23rd Street, right? No guarantee of where the deals are going to be. But historically, I've always been able to find clients very, very good values during that window of time. So if value is your driver, consider waiting. I don't foresee a scenario in which, again, this election is going to make things spike or go down drastically either way. But there's so many variables up in the air that could go any direction that I think if I were a gambling man, and I used to be, I would recommend holding for now. If you are looking to sell for that exact reason, right? We know that inventory is slowly building. That means that competition is going to be slowly building. Gone are the days for the most part where you can just list your house at whatever price you want and get showings anyway, right? I am seeing and have seen listings that I feel are great properties, but they're overpriced, that continue to sit, that don't get any showing requests because buyers are savvy, right? And they're cautious and they're a little nervous now. So if you are looking to sell, number one, make sure you're talking to an agent who's going to guide you appropriately on pricing, because that's the biggest factor here, right? There are homes that if they were priced appropriately instead of at the stretch number the first time, they would have sold. But instead, what they did was help other properties get sold because they were overpriced in comparison. So again, we have to get back into this conversation of compared to what's out there, compared to the other options. We have to get in the mind of the buyers would be ideal for your property and think, what are their alternatives? How do we put you in a position to be the most attractive option? Most attractive does include price, but it's not only price. So if you're looking to sell, again, I highly recommend reaching out. We have a conversation about timing and all of this because, oh, yeah, by the way, in the middle of all of this, come July, as long as it is approved, we are going to see the real estate market and how it functions with listing agents, buyer's agents, and compensation be completely shaken up. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, feel free to Google it, but the headlines are going to scare the crap out of you and it's going to be filled with a lot of misinformation. So I'm going to be making a video, right, coming out next week, explaining what all of this means and to start allowing you to prepare mentally for what your options are going to be, what it's going to look like, and what routes may be the best for you, depending on your approach to this whole thing. So I hope you found this one helpful. And if you did, do me a favor, if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button because most of you who are watching this aren't subscribed yet. And you may have missed some very good videos because you're not. So do me a favor and do that. And if you have questions, drop them in the comments or reach out to me directly. If you want to use me as a sounding board, again, there's no pressure. I'm not pushy in any capacity. Feel free to check out the Google reviews if you are in doubt or unsure. But as always, I appreciate you hanging out with me today. I'll see you next time.